I started out this week intending to make this little mouse, but I made this instead. How I got from here to here is the story of this video. I take a tracing directly from my iPad because it's quick and easy, and parts diagrams are a great way to speed up your sculpting process. To make the armature, I'm just going to use a classic 1/8 inch aluminum wire, but here's a handy tip. I like to make my armature very close in shape to the finished piece. Now this is the greatest invention in the history of mankind, 5-minute epoxy. You simply squeeze out equal amounts, and you're all thinking, but you're going to bake this. Isn't that going to hurt the epoxy? In my experience, epoxy is pretty tough stuff, and no, it won't hurt the epoxy any. So I'm going to mix the epoxy with the second greatest invention in the history of mankind, and that's a popsicle stick. By the way, you can make really nice armatures with popsicle sticks. Works like a champ. So it's pretty simple, as you will see, to goober the parts together. Just simply glue them together with epoxy. That will hold that thing together almighty. And of course, if it gets on the foil below, that's perfectly fine too, because we're going to build the bulk of the armature with foil. All right, let's let that sit till the epoxy dries, and then we're going to come back and I'll show you the next trick that I use to build armatures. I got some Premo for Christmas. Oh, look, fun in a box. What I can already tell you I'm going to have to do is mix up my own custom colors here. We'll be doing that as well. This thing ought to be cured by now, nice and glued up. I like to make armatures that are very, very accurate to the shape of the object that I'm trying to build. So I'm going to use the old classic foil armature business and to start to bulk out this body. But again, I don't want an armature that looks like that. That is not a proper armature. We want it to be tight and close to what the body is going to look like. So after a fair amount of smashing and squishing, I've got the body pretty well built up in foil. Looking good. Ready to put some clay on. Okay, I'm going to be using Sculpey Firm to cover the body, but here's the thing. This stuff is hard, and it's hard to condition. So what you do is lay it out, little piece of parchment paper, put it in the microwave. And in the microwave, it'll soften right up. Okay. Fresh out of the microwave, this clay is nice and soft, super easy to work with. And that is what you want. The thing about the microwave is you got to be careful, because you just want to get it warm enough to work. If you get it too hot, you'll start to cook the clay. And then this is what happens to you. This is partially cooked microwave clay. As you can see, the microwave technique works, but only if you make the clay just warm enough, just a little warmer than your skin. If you get it nice and hot, you will probably cook it into gravel. Just using this paint can, I got this clay rolled out pretty thin, less than 1/8 of an inch. But let's get this first layer of clay on this rat. Get this thing covered. Start from the bottom and just sort of form it on there. Cut that off. So this is going to form our first all-important first layer of clay. Kind of smoothing them out a little, using the table as a tool. These little holes make sure that any air that's trapped in the pockets in the foil will vent out. Good, let's pop him in the oven. I like to mix clay by stacking it into layers, but how many layers does it take to get the colors even? So I got 3 layers. Get out my handy dandy spray can roller. I had 3 layers. I now have 6 layers. Times 2 is 12 layers. So let's go one more, times 2. Now we've got 24 layers of color. So now let's mash that down into a stack. Nowhere near mixed at 24 layers. Okay, let's go forward. Let's crisscross them like that. So now we're at 48 layers times 2, 96 layers of clay. That's pretty good. Mash it down, double that, and now we're at 192 layers. So now you would think that we're starting to get to the point where at 192 layers, it's got to be pretty thoroughly mixed, right? And yet, I don't think so. Now we're at 384 layers. Now we're at 768 layers. Times 2 is 1,536 layers of clay. Times 2, and let's cross them this time. So we now have 3,072 layers of clay. Times 2, we're at 6,144 layers. That's getting to be a pretty good amount. That's getting to be a pretty good amount of layers. Let's cut it in half again. So we're at 12,288 layers. Let's cut it in half again. So we're at 24,576 layers. Let's roll it into a cane. And the amazing thing is, you still see, very clearly see the layers, that the color's not exactly mixed. We are at 24,576 layers. Let's double it again. We're now at 49,152 layers. Double that again. We're at 98,304 layers. And that's getting up there pretty good, but I would double it once more. And now we're at 196,608 layers. And you've got to figure, there is no way you're going to see layers. Oh yeah? Look at that. You're still seeing layers. 196,608 layers. All we can do is keep on doubling. Now we've doubled it again. We're now at 393,216 layers, but just for fun, we'll double it again. And now we're at 786,432 layers of clay in this lump. Now that's a lot of layers. So I just doubled it 3 more times, which means right now, microscopically and incredibly, there are 6,291,456 layers of clay in this blob. And yet, amazingly, if you look at it, those things have to be incredibly tiny. You can still see streakiness. It's unbelievable. All right, the body has come out of the oven looking like this. Had about 2 or 3 layers of Sculpey firm on it. And to make it nice and smooth, I'm going to sand it out. Starting with some pretty rough paper. I don't have to make this thing any too smooth. Just taking out the high points, sanding down the hollows. And I find sanding Sculpey to be faster and more efficient than smoothing it out. It's kind of one of the cool things about Sculpey, actually, is you can build it up, sand it down, build it up some more, sand it down. Very flexible stuff. Nice to work with. All right. Magic of YouTube time lapse. This thing's ready to go. And because of the newspaper, we don't have a giant mess to clean up. We're going to start to cover this body, beginning with the belly, which is going to be that color. So let's see if we can't roll out a belly. A pasta roller makes it quick, but it's not 100% necessary. Let's see how we did. Let's lay that on there and see how we did. Looks pretty good. See if I can cut the clay evenly. Ready to bake. Let's go pop that in the oven. Bond that on there. Just going to spot these hairs around and see if they even work. They're going to be subtle, that's for sure. They won't be a big deal. Okay, I'm going to keep putting them on and come back to you. I got the hairs laid on there. Now the question is, can I roll them flat? And what are they going to look like once I've rolled them flat? I got that pattern pretty well mashed into that clay. All right, now we're going to see if we can drape this skin around this form and not make the biggest mess ever made by the human species. Let's find out. You understand, this entire thing was purely an experiment. Absolutely no idea if it would work or not. Like most of my things, I have no idea if they're going to work or not. Just try them, see what happens. What the heck? Pull that piece off because I want the head to be a different color. Maybe it's time for a little smoothing, a little baby oil maybe. Get it smooth, pop it in the oven, see what happens. And while the back is cooking, let's go ahead and make the skin for the head. I'm just going to put some dots, a dot pattern on it, and mash them down flat. Get up and see if we can drape this thing over the head. It's not leather, it's clay, so you can really deform it. If you just kind of work slowly and patiently and wrap it around, you can pretty much press all the kinks out of it and get it to fit pretty well, surprisingly well, actually. And just trim it off at the bottom. All right, not too bad. So that came out okay. Pretty good. Have to bake that off and go on to the next step. One thing you can do with Sculpey is scrape it if you want to make a smooth surface. It really does scrape really fast and really well. So that's a really effective way to work with it after it's cured. A lot of times you can scrape faster than you can sand. But the thing is, I don't really like the color of the clay, and I don't really like the patterns that I made. On top of that, the body still has some places that need some patching and refining to make it a really nice, smooth shape. But I do like the shape. So I think I'm going to abandon Premo and just make it into a really nice, refined shape and then throw a mold around it. So now I think it's time to hit it with some primer. Here's a pretty interesting development. You just saw me hit this with primer. And here, I'll show you something, just for fun. Surface is super tacky. This primer dries instantly. And it's not drying. I've got a wicked cure inhibition. So this is Rust-Oleum, which is one of my ultra reliable primers. I use it for darn near everything. And I've had no problem with it sticking on Sculpey Firm and regular Sculpey, but here on Premo, look at that, I have cure inhibition. Well, I'm not happy about that, and that won't work. So what I'm going to have to do, of course, is strip the paint off. Here I'm using paint thinner. Normally lacquer thinner would be my go-to solvent, but it's obvious that paint thinner is going to take that paint right off of there. I'm worried now because the Premo inhibited the cure of the primer that it might have a similar devastating effect on the rubber, so I'm going to do a cure test with the rubber before I make the final mold. Now I hit it again with wet paper, and that removed any residue of that primer. So I think it's going to make a really nice mold, and we're going to get onto that phase of this project next. The whole point for having castings of this shape is that I can use it as the basis for lots of different characters, like this rat, or this piranha, or this Stegosaurus. So that should be a good time had by all, and we'll be doing that in future videos. Hey, thanks for watching. I hope you liked it, hope you got something out of it, and I'll see you next week.